Okay. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Nous sommes réunis ici sur le territoire traditionnel non cédé de la nation algonquine Anishinaabe. Et cette reconnaissance du territoire témoigne de l'histoire commune des habitants de ce pays. Puissions-nous poursuivre sur la voie de la vérité et de la réconciliation ensemble, par nos gestes autant que nos paroles. It's appropriate that we're gathering this morning at the National Gallery of Canada. A few blocks away from here, at the then Clarendon Hotel, 146 years ago, the first exhibition was held of the Canadian Academy of the Arts. That academy was the dream of the then Governor-General, the Marquess of Lorne, and his wife, Her Royal Highness Princess Louise. They believed that a young confederation needed institutions through which it could see itself and through which it could be seen by the world. 388 works hung in the Clarendon that evening, and those works would become the seeds of this gallery, which today holds more than 17,000 works of Canadian, Indigenous, and global art. Canada was built on the foundations of three peoples: Indigenous, French, and British. Indigenous peoples mapped this continent, sustained its lands and waters, and built trading networks from coast to coast to coast for thousands of years before any European arrival. The French built a society shaped by river and forest, by partnership with Indigenous nations, and by a determination to flourish in a new world. When the British came, that civilization did not disappear. It suffered, but endured, and in time it grew into the federation that we know today. Let's be clear. That founding was imperfect. It excluded too many. It was built in part on the dispossession and broken promises to Indigenous peoples. But that founding contained an insight that has carried us forward. That unity does not require uniformity. That our differences are a strength to be nurtured, not a risk to be managed. That insight has been sustained and then reinforced, generation after generation, by our institutions: Parliament, the courts, the Crown, the treaties, the Charter, the public service, a free press. Grâce à ces institutions, qu'un pays aussi vaste et diversifié que le nôtre parvient non seulement à rester uni, mais aussi à prospérer. Dans un monde plus dangereux, plus divisé et moins civilisé, les institutions sont plus importantes que jamais. A year ago, His Majesty King Charles opened our Parliament with a speech from the throne, the first time in nearly 70 years that Canada's sovereign had done so in person. The Crown is a continuous thread through our constitutional life. It is, as His Majesty himself said, a symbol of Canada in all her richness and dynamism. And the Governor-General is the Crown's representative in Canada, Commander-in-Chief of the Canadian Armed Forces, steward of our traditions of peace, order, and good government. And above all, the Governor-General is the guardian of our constitutional order. The most demanding part of that role is rarely seen. It's the duty to ensure that government in Canada is formed, sustained, and, when the time comes, dismissed in accordance with law and convention. It's a duty that calls for sound judgment, deep learning, and an unwavering commitment to the rule of law. That is the office. And it is the office to which I have asked His Majesty to appoint a Canadian whose entire life has been dedicated to that very principle. I'm very pleased to announce that on my recommendation, His Majesty has approved the appointment of the Honourable Louise Arbour as the 31st Governor-General of Canada. Née à Montréal, Louise Arbour a fait ses études à l'Université de Montréal. Elle a été admise au barreau du Québec en 1971 et au barreau de l'Ontario en 1977. Elle a commencé sa carrière comme chercheuse à Osgoode Hall et comme ardente défenseur des libertés civiles dans notre pays. In 1987, Louise Arbour was appointed to the Supreme Court of Ontario, as it was then known. In 1990, she was appointed to the Court of Appeal for Ontario. In 1999, she was appointed to the Supreme Court of Canada. One of Canada's most demanding judicial careers, more than enough for one lifetime. That career would serve only as the foundation for what came next, because her most consequential work as a jurist was beyond the Canadian courtroom. In 1996, Louise Arbour was appointed by the United Nations Security Council as Chief Prosecutor of the International Criminal Tribunals for the former Yugoslavia and for Rwanda, the first international criminal tribunals since Nuremberg. She inherited two institutions that many believed could not succeed. She made them succeed. Under her leadership, the tribunal secured the first conviction for genocide since the adoption of the Genocide Convention in 1948. The Akayesu judgment, which also established for the first time that sexual violence can constitute a weapon of genocide and a crime against humanity. And in 1999, in the middle of a war, she signed the indictment of a sitting head of state, Slobodan Milosevic, for crimes against humanity and violations of the laws of war, something that had never been done before. Un nouveau précédent pour la justice sans crainte ni favoritisme. Il ne s'agit pas là de prouesses techniques. Ces réalisations constituent le fondement de principes modernes, selon lesquels aucune personne, aussi puissante soit-elle, et aucun État, aussi bien protégé soit-il, ne se trouve hors de la portée de la loi. That proposition is the foundation of Canadian citizenship. We're a country whose civic identity is grounded in the universality of rights, that what is owed to one of us is owed to all of us. And what is owed to a Canadian is owed, in our tradition, to every human being, whether or not they have the great good fortune to live here. In 2004, Louise Arbour left the Supreme Court of Canada to become United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. For 4 years, she gave voice to those whose dignity was denied, in places where the powerful preferred silence. She did not flinch, and she never confused being heard with being safe. Il existe un troisième fil conducteur dans la carrière de Madame Arbour. Celui-ci est moins souvent évoqué, mais tout aussi important. À 3 reprises, on lui a demandé d'examiner de près une institution qui avait manqué à ses obligations envers les personnes dont elle était responsable et de définir les mesures nécessaires pour remédier à la situation. En 1995, Mme Arbour a présidé l'enquête sur la prison des femmes de Kingston, dont le rapport a contribué à moderniser les pratiques carcérales pour les femmes au Canada. En tant que haut commissaire, elle a exhorté le système de droits de la personne des Nations Unies à montrer digne des personnes qu'il prétendait servir. En 2022, après avoir mené un examen externe et indépendant, a rédigé et déposé un rapport sur l'inconduite sexuelle dans les forces armées canadiennes. Ce rapport, dont les recommandations sont actuellement mises en œuvre, va redéfinir la justice militaire canadienne. Her work matters in and of itself. It also tells us something about what Louise Arbour will bring to Rideau Hall. The conviction that institutions are the load-bearing walls of a civil society, and that they remain trustworthy only as long as someone is willing to hold them accountable. Louise Arbour has held nearly every office a Canadian jurist can hold, and several that no Canadian has held before. She has been recognized with nearly 100 honors and awards, including 42 honorary doctorates from universities around the world. She is a companion of the Order of Canada, our country's highest civilian honor. But the measure of her career is neither in the offices she has held nor the awards she's received. It's in the lives she has changed through her service. Survivors of genocide who saw justice in their lifetimes. Women in prisons in Canada whose conditions were improved because she said what no one else would say. Members of our armed forces who can serve today with greater dignity because of the report that she wrote. Des millions de personnes dont les droits sont mieux protégés parce que, quelque part, une institution que Louise Arbour a contribué à bâtir a effectué son travail. Des millions d'autres, grâce au président et aux normes qu'elle a établies. C'est cela, le service dans son sens le plus vrai. Un service non pas rendu à fonction, mais à des principes. Across more than 5 decades, in every role she's held, the Honourable Louise Arbour has carried the same conviction, that a free society depends on institutions properly being held to account, that the law stands between power and the powerless, that the dignity of every person should not be a product of the accidents of geography, citizenship, or convenience, and that Canada's place in the world is to be a country that lives those propositions and helps others to live them as well. A deeply Canadian conviction, one that's older than our charter and broader than our borders. It runs through our public life, from the person's case to the patriation of our Constitution, from the building of Medicare to the building of the United Nations. C'est la conviction qu'une communauté est plus que la somme de ses membres. Ce sont les institutions, les traditions et les engagements à travers lesquels nous choisissons de vivre ensemble. C'est ce que Louise Arbour a consacré sa vie à défendre et à définir. C'est ce qu'elle apportera à la fonction qu'elle s'apprête à assumer. Now, before I conclude, let me observe that Madame Arbour will succeed an exemplary Governor-General. Her Excellency, the Right Honourable Mary Simon, has been a steadfast representative of Canada and our institutions at home and around the world. As the first Indigenous person to serve in this role, she's carried forward a lifetime of advocacy for Inuit rights, for Indigenous self-determination, and for the preservation of our Indigenous languages, cultures, and identities. Elle nous a rappelé que la réconciliation est une responsabilité à vivre chaque jour dans notre manière d'écouter, d'apprendre et d'agir. De plus, Madame Simon s'est fait la championne de l'alphabétisation et de l'éducation, qu'elle considère comme les fondements de l'autodétermination. Son leadership a aussi contribué à mettre l'enjeu de la santé mentale au haut de notre agenda national, en particulier dans les communautés nordiques et autochtones. Elle a su mettre en lumière des difficultés trop souvent négligées. Elle a ainsi donné une voix à tant de gens qui souffrent et qui sont trop souvent ignorés. Son héritage perdurera non seulement grâce au service qu'elle a rendu, mais aussi grâce à la manière dont elle s'est acquittée sa mission, avec élégance, détermination et une foi inébranlable de notre pays. To Her Excellency, Governor-General Simon, to His Excellency Whit Fraser, to your family, thank you for your extraordinary service to Canada. At a time when much of the world is buffeted by crises and the worst are full of passionate intensity, Canada's history, our institutions, and our enduring traditions matter more than ever. We retain our convictions. We reinforce our institutions. As Mary Simon has, Louise Arbour will represent the best of Canada to Canadians and to the world. A country that's a bastion of security, prosperity, and justice, a beacon to a world lost at sea. A Canada that is clear-eyed about the challenges we face and steadfast in the values we uphold. A Canada that's not just strong, but good. A Canada that's not just prosperous, but fair. A Canada that is not just for some most of the time, but for all of the time. Madame Arbour, au nom du gouvernement du Canada et au nom de l'ensemble de la population canadienne, merci d'avoir accepté de servir notre pays une fois de plus.